need to have some understanding of it. Now, before we get into Umar's
Please explain the
situation,
history.
I want you to understand that if you've heard this other thing about Umar with his daughter, and he's a deadbeat dad and all that, hey, we're not here to have that discussion. If that's how you feel, that's fine. Umar Johnson is a trained school psychologist. He's educated, and some of the stuff that he says is very poignant. So I want to make sure that when he does have a good message, that I'm able to project that message out, because not everything that he says is bullshit, okay? We don't know about this school. It is what it is, okay? But when it comes to special education and IEPs, because he was the school psychologist, he has a very interesting perspective on it, and I think you guys should really see it.
Explain the history of the IEP, individual education program, and how it's supposed to work in theory
Shouts
versus
to
how
I
it
never knew
works in
TV for
reality.
the clip too.
Great question. So when we talk about IEP, individual education plan, we're talking about the world of special education. Now, there's three things that automatically go together when we're dealing with IEP. It's a trinity. You can't have one without the others. They are the IEP, a learning disability classification, and special education. If you mention any one of those, the other two are automatically present. Special education is a program that gives the child an IEP because they have a learning disability. No learning disability, no IEP. If you have an IEP, you're in special ed. They all go together. I say that because sometimes you'll hear parents say, my child has an IEP, but he's not in special ed. If he has an IEP, he's in special ed on paper. The school's getting money for his education. He may not be assigned to a self-contained classroom. He may still be in a regular class, but he's still a special ed student. They're still getting paid for him. Here's the issue with special ed. If children did not receive a special ed subsidy, there would be no special ed. First of all, let's be clear. The only reason why New Jersey, Philly, Maryland, California, Texas, I don't care where you go. We can go down to the American islands. We can go down to St. Thomas and St. Croix. Same thing. The schools are putting black kids in special ed because they want that money. Let me give you an analogy.
Now, let me say this. Like I said, Umar has an interesting way of putting things, but I will say this. In my memory, when I was a kid, the special education kids were like special education kids. They got the short bus. A lot of them had headgear on. You know what I'm saying? That was special education. Everybody else was in the regular classes. Everybody else was dealing with the same social circles. You know, now if you were stupid or slow or whatever, you might get picked on, but you were in with the rest if you didn't have a severe mental disability. Like if you were just a goofy ass kid, you talk too much like me, you was in with the regulars. Being a jumper and a runner did not put you into the ADHD category that put you into what they call special education. So somewhere along the lines that changed and this IEP thing happened. I need to look into when that started because I know for a fact, just looking back on it, there was some kids that didn't do as well in certain classes, right? So they might end up in a class behind, in my class, while I'm one grade behind them, right? That would happen. But the special education kids were, like I said, they were special education kids. They were, they needed a specialized education because they had a severe mental disability. They weren't just, goofing off in class in first grade. See my point? So, and they're putting these IEPs on kids early, like first grade, when they're still goofing off. They're just getting used to even being in school. They were just getting their pamper changed 2 years before. You see what I'm saying? So, anyway, let me let Umar
You're a
continue.
principal in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. 70% of your students qualify for free and reduced lunch. 60% come from single homes. None of them are reading on grade level. You know why they're not reading on grade level, because your teachers aren't teaching them. You know the feeder school didn't prepare them. So you have a decision. You're either going to tap into your Title I money and get those children the extra help that they need, or you're going to send them to the school psychologist. If you send them to the school psychologist, you're going to get a 100% increase in that child's funding. Special ed students are worth twice as much as the regular. So for example, let's take Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia school students probably get about, hypothetically, approximately $15,000 per student, right? Once they go in special ed, that child is worth almost 30 now. 30. It's a double your money. How many people you know, if they got a chance to double their money, are not going to double it? So sticking with you as the black principal, do you care about them kids? Because if you care about your students, you're going to make the teachers teach them. You're going to find the money in your budget to get them to after-school tutoring. Mind you, you already get Title I money. You already getting Title I. Title I funds comes out of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Lyndon Baines Johnson, War on Poverty, 1965. This money is earmarked for children in low-income schools to improve what? Reading and math. What are most black kids in special ed for? Reading and math. So if you're getting Title I money to address reading and math, why are all these children with reading and math problems ending up in special ed where you were already given money to help them? You know why? Poor oversight of Title I spending
There we go.
and
Oversight.
greed.
Said
I
it.
know I got my Title I money, but I'm going to use that for something else. I want this extra special ed money. It's about greed and it is about neglect of black children. And here's the big thing. Our parents, brother. This whole system of special ed to prison, the whole special ed to prison pipeline is held together by uneducated. When I say uneducated, I'm not talking about academically. Uneducated about special education. So black parents don't understand that special ed is not a solution. I don't fault them for that because the way they pitch it to you in a way that makes you feel like special ed is the best thing that ever happened to black children. He'll never get left back again. He'll get extra time. He'll get extra time on his
They
tests.
wasn't ready for
We're going to
this
slow down the
episode today.
curriculum. We're going to give him his own learning plan, small group.
I got this one question real quick, right? Is the I noticed then I taught for 5 years in Philadelphia public school, right? And with the sped kids, do they have to pass them or do they pass them so they don't have to show the paperwork for failing to give them service?
Great question. Are schools required to promote special education students? The issue is this. The IEP team determines what the child is going to learn while they're in special ed.
Mhm.
So who technically decides if that child gets retained or promoted? The IEP team. Who's on the IEP team? 4 required people: the parent, the principal or designee, the regular ed teacher, and the special ed teacher. These 4 people meet every year to do a new IEP. The IEP must be done annually because you move up in grade annually, right? So when you meet, you decide as a team, he needs to repeat. That's not likely to happen in special ed for 3 reasons. Legally, can they be retained? Yes. A special ed child can be retained. Absolutely. I've retained them before, but it's not likely to happen. Why? 3 reasons. Number 1, what is the job of the IEP team? To monitor progress. To monitor progress. So if this kid has an IEP
Right.
and he still can't read or hasn't made reading progress to the point where you have to consider retaining him,
Justify your job.
where was the progress monitor? You got to justify your job. How, at the end of the year, are we talking about keeping them back when the whole purpose of the IEP is the pushing forward? That's number 1. Number 2, when the state and the feds come in to audit your books, if they see too many special ed kids being retained, it lets them know you're not really helping them. Number 3, the teacher who initially referred him for special ed, why did she want him tested in the first place? It wasn't for academics most of the time. It was for behavior. So you mean to tell me you're going to go right back to the same teacher who had him put in special ed and say, we're sorry, Mrs. Slovenberg, he's going to have to repeat 3rd grade. She's going to look at you like you're crazy. The reason I put him in special ed is to get him out my class. And you're telling me I'm stuck with him for another year. That's why special ed kids are rarely retained. And I think it's a problem, brother, because we have special ed kids being socially promoted who don't know anything, who go to school in states with a graduation examination. If you live in a state that has a graduation exam and you've been socially promoted all through special ed, when you get to 12th grade, you got to take that test. You can barely read. You know what it does? It automatically perpetuates the school to prison pipeline because you're going to drop out because you can't pass. You don't get a diploma. What is life going to be for that special ed kid who was socially promoted from 1st grade when he first got his IEP till 12th grade when he failed the graduation test? He don't have a diploma. He's on the street. Drugs, guns, the military not even going to take him if he can't get a GED. And a lot of these brothers we see on the corner selling dope, they were the special ed children who were not academically prepared for life, and they ended up on the street because they had nowhere else to go after they failed the graduation test.
And you made a great point. And one more thing I want to add, that they're spiritually demoralized. They don't feel they can accomplish anything. Because don't get it twisted. The kids sit there and know they haven't done anything.
Yes, sir.
Past,
Yes, sir.
Year after year.
Yes, sir. And they know that they're allowed to
To
they
screw
know that
up.
they're allowed to exist in an atmosphere of mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
They know they don't have to perform. They know that they don't have to achieve. And the biggest side effect of special ed, and this is why I always tell parents, I tell teachers, never tell your child that they have this disability.
Because until
Before
then,
you tell him he has ADHD, before you tell him he's reading disabled, before you tell her she's intellectually disabled, she thinks she can make it. Do you feel me? They do not see no difference between themselves and the next student. But the minute you tell them you're reading disabled, you emotionally disturbed, you just created a glass ceiling. It's a self-perpetuating prophecy that the child is now going to live up to. I was told I got a reading disability. I don't have to try. I don't have to study. I don't have to do homework. And so for me, the number one side effect of putting kids in special ed who don't need it is the low self-esteem, the low self-worth that it engenders in a child. And let us be clear, special ed kids have one of the highest dropout rates. Well, what do you expect? Nobody believes in me, not the teacher. And then once the other students in the school find out that that's the special ed class, it's over. Because they're going to pick on me forever to the point where I don't even want to show up to school because everybody know I'm special.
Well, I would like to first thank Umar for not saying the stuff 3-4 times like he be doing. It was a pretty good Keith, thanks for stopping into the chat there. So we're dealing with the last school teens we're going to. They're going to end up being homeschooled. And they need to be honest with you. Like I said, I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper into the issue I personally am facing with special education programs. But a lot of people don't even understand the history of the IEPs, special education, and things like that. And these were the things that this so-called federal Department of Education were funding. So as far as I'm concerned, if the funding was coming from the Department of Education and the kids are getting dumber, then you know what? Whatever that process wasn't working. So if they want to break it down and rebuild it into a working, functional process, I'm all for that. Whatever that takes. It might be a mess first, but whatever that takes. But Umar gets into it. And like I said, I'm doing this one with Umar because for once he likes to repeat himself a lot in his lives, but in these interviews he's very straightforward, and I like that. That's probably why I like these particular clips, because he's making his point. He's being very eloquent with his speech. He's not wilding out, and it's because he does have a mind for education. Like I said, even if that school never came to be, the idea was a decent idea. I understood what he was standing for at the time. But, you know, black people ain't going to come together to build no schools. We don't do that. We don't do that. So I'm going to take you to the second clip so that you understand the...
Majority of the children will be special ed.
All right. Let me just say this. Like I said, for those who are not parents, you might be missing this particular episode. Ain't for you. But this is for those of us who still have children in school, middle school, high school, kids, especially those who have been placed in IEP programs, special education for behavioral issues, not academic. See, academic is different. I can't learn because something's not right up here. But because you was goofing off in class in the first grade to the third grade, that's the parents I'm talking to. Because once you get in that situation and the school is receiving money specifically for your child, that money's now worked into their budget. They don't want your kid to ever come off of special ed. You see what I'm saying? Once you own it, you own it. Because at that point it becomes part of the budget. So putting your children on a special education IEP program because they don't want to sit the hell down, that's not always the best idea. You just got to teach them some discipline, and maybe you got to be a little more involved with certain kids. But behavioral issues, the kid that's talking too much or goofing off too much or likes to hum, because I've heard that one before, the kid be humming in the class too much. That's not a learning disability. He's just being a kid, or she's just being a kid, because this is both sexes, and it's not just black children. I know Umar focuses on the black, and that's Umar. But I've been in different school systems. He was in Philly in a predominantly black school system, so his angle comes directly from that. My angle comes from being in very diverse areas, upper middle class areas, and watching the differences of education between the kids that were doing well and the kids they don't really feel like dealing with. So I know personally of a story of a kid who literally was put on special education IEP in the first grade in the midst of his parents going through a divorce, and he was acting out in school. And instead of just understanding that this child was going through the divorce of his parents, they said he was special education. So I'm going to let Umar say his little piece about special education specifically. We talked about the IEP last time. Now we're going to talk about the special education, the role of it, right? And how it actually works. But yeah, I'm talking about a kid. We know the kid is in the middle of a parental custody battle and is acting out in school. How the hell is that a learning disability? What that is he's going through something, and we need to keep an eye on what this kid is going through instead of being so worried that he keeps joking around in class. Anyway.
I think if we're talking about the American African children, a good deal of them are going to be special ed. If they're in a predominantly black community, they're going to end up being special ed because white teachers don't want to be bothered teaching. Another reason they're going to be special ed, black parents have been miseducated to think that special ed helps their children. A third reason they're going to be special ed is due to the funding. In struggling schools, the special ed dollar is the only guaranteed extra dollar you can get. Therefore, schools parasitically exploit the learning difficulties of black children for money, even when they know there's not a real organic learning disability there. So the hustle is real. More money, more problems is what Notorious B.I.G. say. I would say more problems, more money is the motto of special ed. The worse you make the child look, the more money you get for them.
But good
the other
information is good
situation,
information.
if you're talking about a predominantly white school district, they're going to end up in special ed because they don't want them in the classrooms. I think where black parents go wrong with taking children out of black school districts and putting them in white school districts is they fail to remember the history. Our biggest explosion in independent schools in America took place between 54 and 74. The Brown decision in special ed. White people, after the Brown decision, they decided that they were going to just retreat into the suburb and give their child a private education to keep them away from black children. So when they ran from the inner city, which was part of the white flight, it wasn't just residential, it was educational as well. I don't want my children going to school with black children unless my white daughter falls in love with a black boy. And so in that retreat, they barricaded their children away from ours. So when that black family shows up in that private school or suburban public school, either or, because you're still showing up in an area where you're not wanted, when you show up, your child is more likely to be special educated or medicated because they're not wanted. The way white people see it, we inconvenienced ourselves to get away from you. And you have the audacity to move out here or somehow make a way for your child to attend school out here. So that...
Just to let y'all know in the chat, especially if you're new to the channel, Umar he's a black Pan-Africanist. So everything that he says will come from a black angle. We, as objective Indepublicrats here at Purge the BS, are able to insert the proper words that add additional context. So Keith is 100% correct. It is not just black kids and parents. It's Keith in the chat. For those who catch this later, you won't see the chat, but whatever. It is not just black kids and parents. It is just kids and parents. Because this is going on everywhere. It's in the suburban schools, like I said. The special ed kids are not just black kids. In urban areas where it's predominantly black, yes, they're going to be mostly black kids because the area is black. But if you go into the diverse areas, you'll start to see what you won't see is Asian kids in the damn special education. You will not see that. And I mean like the traditional Asian, okay? You know what I'm saying? You'll never see them in no special ed class. Not never. Not never. And is that because they got better brains or bigger brains? Nope. That's because when somebody approached their kid with some goofy shit about an IEP, they were like, hell no. Get them a tutor. Make sure the tutor's there to understand the actual assignments that the kid is working on, or whatever the situation is. But I don't never see no Asian kids in special ed. That's all I'm saying. Never. I ain't never seen it. You want to show me one that, unless he's got a severe mental disability. That's what I'm saying, like Down syndrome or something like that. No, I'm talking about just a kid at school that be goofing around a little bit. I ain't never seen no Asian kid in no damn special education. And Donald J. Plump, you know what I'm talking about, because Asia is a lot. It's a large, you got Pakistan. You know, Pakistan is you don't think Asia when you think of Pakistan, but Pakistan's in Asia. So I'm talking, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it because the YouTube is going to tell me it was hate speech or something, but you know what I'm talking about. The people that, you know what I'm talking about. Bruce Lee types, okay? Those Asians. All right, so nonetheless, I'm going to let Umar finish his little thing. But you're right, Keith, there's discipline involved. It takes a community to raise the children. But if you allow these people to sell you on this dream of this specialized education that never really happens, it never really happens. What does occur is they start allowing your kid to just do dumb shit, and then they blame it on this so-called disease that they may or may not even have. Then they start feeding them full of drugs. They got all types of weird side effects. Kids falling asleep in class like they on Suboxone or something. You know what I'm saying? All for the sake of what? Not even, just because they don't want them to make noise. They don't want them to hum in the back of the class. So now you're in special education because you sing too fucking much. And I'm not playing. This is real I'm talking about because I know it personally. And me personally, I don't like any of it. Now, unfortunately, in my situation, I don't have the agreement on the other side of a parenting because some people believe the hype about these IEPs. But after going through it for 7 years and the kid's still struggling, I'm telling you, it didn't work 7 years ago, and now it's 7 years in the future, and it still ain't working. So who was right, who was wrong? So can we change this thing now? That's all I'm saying. But let me let Umar finish his part before I get into my shit. Because I'm too through with this. We all mad about the damn Department of Education. No, I'm mad about what was happening to the money that they were sending to the local districts for the students. For all of the students, not just the ones they like, that they see as successful, that they want to put in the GT programs, that they want to put in the little after-school joints and have them meeting up with the special chess teams and all that shit. When they like you, they send letters home. Hey, your kid might, benefit from this program we have or this after-school thing. If they don't like you, you don't get nothing but absence notes and complaints. That's it. Freaking ridiculous. Anyway, let's go through
agenda to special educate, it quadruples, which is ironic in the minds of a lot of black parents because on paper, my child should do better out here. They got the highest test scores. They're one of the best schools in the state. They're one of the best schools in the country. But yet they're telling me my child needs special ed. They're telling me he needs psychiatric medication. And my message to those parents is, what else did you expect to happen? White people came out here to get away from you. And here you are chasing them out there to the suburbs to stick your child in their private school or their suburban public school. So what they're going to do, they're going to intensify the special education agenda against you. I was part of a class action lawsuit, Lower Merion High School, Kobe Bryant's alma mater, that was put on by the Public Interest Law Center in Philadelphia. I was one of the expert certified school psychologist witnesses. And we found that they were putting children in special ed for learning disabilities who had no learning disability at all. Not only did they not have a learning disability, they were not even academically deficient. So this wasn't a question of skills deficiency versus learning disability. They were not even behind.
And this is another issue I have with this whole influx of special education is that the kids are basically being graduated without doing work for the most part because they're just pushed through. The accountability seems to be very low. Now you have a large population of people going into society with no basic skills to contribute to society. That's like my biggest concern. And I've witnessed this firsthand. I've seen a large portion of kids just get pushed through school who were considered special ed, and they don't have any skill set to earn or do anything after school. And that's my biggest concern because when you put these kids in the environment, it seems like they really internalize this idea about themselves. Their confidence is crushed, and it hurts their earning potential long term because they themselves aren't putting in work or think they're capable of putting in the work that'll put them in a position to earn long term.
I'm gonna go back to something I said during our first interview and tie it in to what I want to say now. when we discussed something similar, and I brought up the fact that in special ed, children are graded based on progress towards the IEP goal, not state standard. Parents are not told this. So you're being socially promoted. Special ed is legal social promotion. It absolutely is, because you're graded based on progress towards the IEP goal. So if I'm a 5th grader.
Until you get to high school, depending on where you at. When you get to high school, then it's a little different. You still got to meet certain credit minimums, but they haven't prepared the kid for high school. So they come into high school, and high school is expecting them to know something, and they start failing everything. That's what seems to be happening now. And that's why these kids are not reading on the right grade level, because they got pushed through when they were at the lower grade levels. So when they get to a certain point where they got to take state standardized tests, they're normally not that good at them. So Lindsay in the chat, thank you for stopping in over here. It seems like we got a couple of folks who are dealing with this same kind of thing. Like I said, I'm going through my thing right now, and I'm going to finish off with that. But I'm going to let Umar finish his little speech here as well. Because like I said, if you've ever watched Umar Johnson on his normal stuff when he's going live, he will say the same line like 4 or 5 times. It's very annoying. So it's hard for me to take in the point. But in these 2 particular videos, he didn't do that. And I think it's because he was 100% focused on saying what it was he had to say. I mean, it was very important to him. And that's why I received this particular message, okay? Now, all the stuff about his daughter and whether or not he's a deadbeat dad, we're not covering that. Everybody's talking about that right now. But at the end of the day, we don't know the situation between him and the mother. We don't know, okay? We know he was paying child support, and he paid every cent that he was supposed to, and the rest we don't know. So I leave it to you see what I'm saying? I leave it to the ether at that point. I don't know nothing but that. That's enough. That's his family. Whatever.
Reading on the 2nd grade level, and my parents allowed my IEP team to get away with creating a reading goal that says I'm only going to be reading on the 3rd grade level next year. I'm going to get an A on my report card because I'm making steady progress towards that 3rd grade goal. But I'm a 5th grader. So even if I meet this annual goal, I'm still 2 grades beneath. But my parents are not comprehending that they're still setting me up for failure, although it appears like I'm making progress.
That's the other problem.
So what happens is,
anyway, sorry.
You go through enough IEP rotations, 1 a year, required by law, 1 IEP meeting a year, and it looks like the child is making progress, but what the parent is not perceiving is his progress is so small compared to the children in the regular classroom that every year he goes up, the gap between him and the others is still getting wider, because you're only moving up 1 grade, and you're already a few grades behind. The regular children are moving up an entire full grade based on state standard. You're moving up maybe a full grade, but on 3rd grade level. So this is how you're in the 5th grade reading on the 2nd. You're in the 7th grade reading on the 3rd. You're in the 8th grade reading on the 5th. You're in the 10th grade. The gap is getting wider and wider. And then what happens is this. The parent finally finds out my child is not academically functional for graduation.
Here we go.
The school district says, uh-oh, we messed up. We really didn't make sure this kid received their free and appropriate public education. Now, special ed doesn't have to end until age 21. The right thing to do is what? Not give him a diploma, let him continue. He don't have to stay in the school. The special ed teacher can come to the home, they can meet at the library, they can meet at the community college. He don't have to stay in school. IEP is 3 to 21. I had this case with Lower Marion. Once again, I'm not sure if this was part of the class action lawsuit.
Thompson in the chat, thanks for stopping in.
He's about to graduate. He was put in special ed in the 1st grade, I believe it was. He went 12 years. Time to graduate, not academically functional. I told the attorney and I told his mother, give the diploma back. They're not done. He's 17, about to turn 18. They got 3 more years. Special ed ends with a diploma or age 21, whichever comes first. Your son got 3 more years. Give the diploma back. I don't know what became of that situation, but that was my recommendation, and they did win a settlement from the school district. But my point is this. The school district, when that child is about to graduate, will say, this parent has grounds to take us to due process. They can get comp ed, which means all the money, all the special ed money that was ever given to that child is now due to the family. It doesn't go to the parent in a check. It goes into an escrow. You build a school district for services until you use the money up. So whether that's tutoring, whether that's therapy, whether that's trade school training, whatever you want to do, they owe you comp ed. Compensatory education is reparations for miseducation, right? It literally is. We're going to pay you reparations for damaging your child. Most school districts are not going to do that, though. They're not going to tell the parent we failed your child. They're not going to tell the parent he don't have to graduate. They're not going to tell the parent we owe you comp ed. You know what they're going to do out of guilt and to protect themselves from any legal ramification? Socially graduate.
Yep.
Socially graduating. And sometimes the black teachers who care will socially graduate them because they're looking at the parent, not too concerned. They're looking at the school. He ain't going to learn nothing hanging around here. I'm going to socially graduate him and hope he get his life together on the other side. Because the options that are available to me, none of them seem promising for this child. So I've seen where the teachers say, listen, Dr. Umar, if we fail him, he's not coming back. He's never going to get a diploma. He's not going to take the GED. And by the way, they made the GED even tougher now. So if you want to drop out and just take the GED, it's tough to pass the GED now because they made that more strenuous.
Explain real quick how they made the GED tougher.
They intensified the verbal. They intensified the quantitative. They intensified the writing requirement. It's a lot tougher now than it was before. And you know why they did this? Because once they had that wave of mandatory graduation tests that swept the country about 10 years ago, when all the states started saying you're going to have to pass a test to graduate, that's when they said, well, they're just going to drop out and take the GED. So they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make the GED even more strenuous to serve as a deterrent away from children dropping out and taking a GED and try to earn your high school diploma. So New York, I believe they have graduation exit exam. Jersey, who has the regents? New York has the regents or New Jersey has the regents? I think both of them have a graduation test. Pennsylvania tabled theirs, but I think it's coming back. But right now, nearly half the states have mandatory graduation exam. And for a lot of them, that 12th grade state standardized assessment that you've always taken is now the graduation exam. So
all right. Well, so y'all heard about special education. You've heard about the IEP. And now you're going to hear what I have to say about it. And I want to thank you guys for interacting in the chat. I know this, like I said, it's a different episode than normal. I didn't go through my normal comedy part of it in the beginning, and but it's just really, it's really become something that's like a front street for me, only because I guess right now, because I'm dealing with it. And I realize now that what occurred is, I was not necessarily brainwashed, but at least one party in that meeting was. And because of current day, I guess you would say, stereotypes or perceived whatevers, parents can be removed or at least isolated out of their children's education. And that is a problem for me. So let me take it there. Let me take it all the way through what we've talked about today. So we have a reduction in force in the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, right? And this federal Department of Education dropped 50% of their department's workforce, okay? Now, if you're a student or a parent, this might affect you directly. The department oversees big programs like the Pell Grants, student loans, and of course, special education, which we talked about. The stuff that kind of keeps the schools running, keeps the schools funding, or at least that's the perception of it, right? But I personally have never actually tracked the funds that are given to the school for special education, specifically for a student that would be my child. I've never actually gotten an invoice to say we paid this much for this and we paid this much for that. No. So a lot of people are upset about the Department of Education itself at the federal level closing down, but there's other people that see it differently, because the department is saying that this is moving about $500 million a year back into currency that can be sent to the states and possibly to the people if they decide to give people money back. But I don't even need the money back. If you give it to the schools and we can actually utilize it for what it should be used for, then I'm okay with that. So the main thing is that my argument and most people's argument is that the federal government has been like bloating up their expenditures, and for some reason at the same time as going up in expense, it's going down in the quality of education. Programs have been cut, things like driver's ed, wood shop, a lot of sports programs get cut. Just over the last few years, it's gotten to the point. I remember there used to be a time where you had like a physical something every day to get some of that energy up off of you. You used to have, you started with recess in elementary school, and when you were in high school, you had PE. You had to climb the rope, you know what I'm saying, and do the vault jump thing and all that kind of stuff that you don't even regularly do, but you got a lot of physical activity out of it. They cut all of that out. They cut out after-school programs such as they had like a homework programs. They started cutting those out, and everything just is gone at this point. So if you're not part of the group of kids that gets kind of that special treatment, there's nothing for you to do. There's nothing for you to do. So here's where the flip